Live from Washington, D.C., it's the Pay Dirt Football Show.
Are you trying to give me the double talk?
You talk too much.
And now, sit back and listen to 2 hours of biased, brainless blithering sure to drop your sports IQ by at least 20 points.
7 years of college down the drain.
Pay Dirt is on the air.
And welcome everyone to the show. This is PAFL edition, Action PC Football, hosted all by PayDirtFootball.com. So if you're wondering what kind of league to get into, we have leagues for you. We've got Action PC Football leagues and we've got Madden leagues, all coach mode. So if you're one of those joystick jockeys, we're not going to be making you very happy. So this week, what we're going to do is cover the playoff games for the PAFL. We are in the Wildcard round, and we've got 4 games to talk about tonight. So without further ado, we're going to hand this over to Calvin, and he's going to fill you in on what we've got.
I'm really just going to turn it over to Joe, because this will be Joe doing the predictions in the PAFL, and if we happen to have some extra time at the end, we may talk PSAFL. Go ahead, Joe. But I would say, I thought we had a real successful season. Thought we got a really strong group of owners. I think it went very well, so I'm very pleased with the season. So now we'll see what happens in the playoffs. But take it away, Joe.
Yep.
Well, if you look at who made the playoffs and who didn't, I'm going to take a wild guess. I didn't go back to look at the very beginning of the season when everybody was talking. But I don't think there's a tremendous amount of difference between the teams that made it versus the teams that we thought were going to make it. So pretty much everybody, don't get me wrong, there were some surprises, but I thought that most of the teams lived up to their potential. So first game here we're looking at, and by the way, there is a write-up on the website. By all means, please take a look at it if you get the opportunity. But this is the one game where the road team, Indianapolis, is going to play the division winner in the AFC West, and they have the better record. And if you look through the season at the Colts, they've had some really snake-bitten losses. They really did. They on paper they are a pretty darn good team, and so are the Raiders. They went into this year with really only questions at quarterback, but if you look at the way, and I think part of the reason it happened this way is that Chris wasn't able to play a lot of his games, so he had guest coaches, and everybody who guest coaches kind of just goes in there totally all out and don't really pay attention to the usage. But even with the and you get and Calvin, help me out here, how much enhancement you get going into the playoffs? It's like 10% plus 6, so it's like 16%.
Yes, because the game gives you about 6%. The game gives you 1/17, so 17 games in a season, and we kick it by 10% more.
Yeah, but
that helps, because these two teams are severely fatigued. And actually, the Raiders I don't think they played more than like 6 games face to face. They were computer coached like crazy.
Yeah,
and I just have to get with Chris. I know he has, life gets busy and stuff, but hopefully, he's able to participate more actively here. So, but carry on, Joe.
Oh, I was going to say is that if you look, there's fatigue issues on the Colts side, but when you look at what's on the Vegas, I don't see how they're going to be able to effectively run the football in the playoffs, just because of the amount of the amount of carries that all of their running backs have over and beyond what their real season stats were in the NFL. And considering that Davis Mills didn't throw, he was not the most active passer in the league, and the other 2 guys that they have on that team are just grossly over the amount of attempts. They have to pretty much go with Davis Mills. There's really no choice on that matter. And so when you look at the skill positions, it's going to be very hard for the Raiders to score. Now, to their benefit, they've got one of the best defenses in the league. So the Colts are going to have a difficult time scoring, and the Colts also have their issues with fatigue. I just, in this particular game, this is the one game where I and I'm kind of giving away some here, but where I gave the road team a little bit of a nudge here, because I think that that all in all, I can close my eyes and envision more ways that I see the Colts putting points on the board than I can the Raiders. And even with that Raiders defense being as good as it is, so I have the Colts as a small favorite in this game.
Yeah. Go Bob. Bob will be happy with that.
Oh yeah, that or he'll feel like I'm cursing him. One of the two.
Well, he's got some good receivers here. So tight end Cook, he's okay. Running back, yeah. Although they got Hilliard, but he doesn't have very many carries. His main guy is Elliott, solid, but he's never going to break away with anything big.
It all comes down to Carr. Does he have good Carr or bad Carr?
Yeah, and he's got a great offensive line. At least, 4 out of 5 of them are really good. So you're favoring the Colts by how much?
I had the Colts up by winning by 2, and the reason is because historically, regardless of what you tend to see in most wild card weekends, as far as on paper, the home team usually wins. And it's just one. I think the game model tends to favor what goes on in the NFL for real. And if you really look at the NFL, it's kind of rare to see more than one wild card team on the road wild card team win a wild card game.
Right.
You just typically don't see it. And there's a reason why they're on the road.
That's right. There's a reason.
Yeah. So. And then this game here, Cleveland versus Buffalo. Now, I played Stan first week, and I was so impressed with their front seven, the way that the way they just stomped the living snot out of me, and the talent they have on the defensive front. And I was going, they could, if you don't press them. I mean, they don't necessarily have the greatest secondary in the world, but if you've got as many 10s and 9s in the front seven, you don't need to. I mean, the quarterback, if he can't throw it, if he's on his back, who cares who's playing corner?
He's got 2 10s, 3 10s, and a 9 in the front seven. And a 7 and an 8.
Yeah. So it's
wow.
So Cleveland has, I've been on the Cleveland bandwagon since the very beginning. But if you look at the 2 games that they played this year in division, Buffalo has dominated Cleveland this year. And this is just not a matchup that does well for Cleveland. It, and part of the reason is that total amount of rushing yards that Cleveland has had against Buffalo in both games that they played this year was 79 yards. And meanwhile, in just the last game alone, Buffalo's rushed for over 150 something yards. So if you're turning around and you're if you look at that last game, they sat there. Buffalo held the ball for 31 more plays and had 17 more minutes of time of possession. And if you're going to beat a team with that type of a dominant front seven, the way you do it is to wear them down. And if you look at both of those games that Buffalo played against Cleveland, Buffalo wore them down. And so the question is there anything about this particular week that's going to make it any different than it has been in the past? And I just don't see it.
Well, Buffalo's got a good secondary. I mean, as far as their corners go, they're good. Safeties leave a little bit to be desired there, but
Lengrade's tough. Good corner. I mean, good. That's an awesome 2-9 quarterbacks.
Right.
Understatement of good. I go great corner.
Well, but then you've got your safeties, which is a 6 coverage and a 5 coverage. So
it's okay.
Yeah.
You can play some zone. You can play some man. You can do both.
Move them around a lot.
It depends on, matchups. does Cleveland have a dominating tight end? I don't know off the top of my head.
I don't know.
I think it's not. I don't know how to pronounce his name. NJ
Njoku.
Yeah, I think that's there. I could be wrong though. I'm not an expert on the AFC. I only have to play them a few games.
I think I'd have to. I think I might have to give the advantage here myself to the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, Buffalo, like I said, they could, they convincingly won. Like I said, the combined scores between Buffalo and Cleveland this year was 49-13.
Yeah.
And so, whatever it is, Darryl has had Stan's numbers so far this season. Does that mean Stan can't win? Well, when you've got that kind of a front seven, of course you can win.
Sure.
You generate some turnovers, but they have not forced Lamar Jackson to have to do anything to heroic to win a game, and they've been able to pound the ball down Cleveland's throat, which is pretty impressive when you consider what kind of a defensive front seven that Cleveland has.
Well, and this game is kind of like real life in a way to where you have some, you have that great front seven, and then you'll have a few games to where that great front seven plays okay, and then you'll have a couple runs, a couple game run where they just dominate. The same thing here with what I had in the PSAFL last year with my secondary. There'd be a couple games where they just played very pedestrian, and then Diggs would just show up and get 4 interceptions.
Yeah,
it's all regressing to the mean. I think the difference is though Cleveland is healthy. Both teams are very healthy, so it's because Cleveland they lost their cornerbacks for pretty long stretches. I think they have Horn. I think it's going to be a very good game, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key will be and it doesn't mean that Stan has to run for 200 yards, but he's got to be able to hold on to the ball enough to where his defense doesn't get worn down in the third and fourth quarters. He's got to be able to at least be able to have 4 or 5 minute drives in the second half, and do that against. I mean, if all he's doing is trying to play catch up against those 2-9 safeties or 2-9 corners, it's going to be a long day. Yeah. But if he can sit there and establish enough of a running game to where he can get a few first downs, even if he doesn't score, but at least have the ball long enough to where he's the time of possession is at least a little closer, then he's got a shot.
Oh, he's definitely got a shot. These are tough teams.
Yeah,
this is a good matchup.
Yeah. And then when you're looking at the Giants and the Rams, and I sat there and I said in this thing here, if you look at the rosters between, just don't go on the first tab, but go through every other tab other than quarterback, and you look at these two rosters, you see a lot of similarities. They both have got some good talent at the skill positions. They both have decent offensive lines. They both have good defensive front sevens and secondary. In fact, the Giants actually have a better secondary than what the Rams have. And so you go, okay, well, why are the Rams 3 games better than the Giants? Well, I think it's because I think when you compare Baker Mayfield to Tom Brady, I think that's kind of your I think that's your Achilles. And like I put in the write-up, Baker will go Baker every a couple games a year. And an excellent example of that was the 2 games where the Giants played the Eagles. Now in the first game, Baker went Baker and totally sucked, and the Eagles won by I want to say like 26 points. In the second game, Baker threw 1 touchdown, no interceptions, had a quarterback rating of 111.3, and the Eagles had to win with a touchdown at 18 seconds left. So, the Giants almost beat the Eagles, who have a bye and won the division. And so it's not inconceivable. It all depends on how Baker plays in comparison to Tom Brady. Because if Baker, if Baker hasn't made too many mistakes or too many errors and not force the Giants into where they're become one-dimensional, then then I think that they match up pretty well against the Rams.
So Baker shouldn't be drinking any beer. Who's the backup quarterback on the Giants? Who's the other one?
Brissett.
Yeah, who knows? He may play Brissett. It's hard to say.
Let's see. I don't know.
Depends.
Looks like 6 of
Hard
one,
to
half
say.
dozen of the other for those two
Yeah,
guys.
just name your poison. But you know, stranger things.
So
But,
who
you
do
know,
you?
you got your big Browns fan with Baker and
Yeah.
Brissett. So go ahead, Joe. You picking Joe?
I went with the Rams, and the reason I said is because, well, Brady's better than Baker. I mean, and so almost if I'm going to have to bet who's going to have a better game in the playoffs, I'm going to go with Brady. But it doesn't mean that if Baker doesn't go toe to toe with Brady, it's and like I put in the write up, it's not that Baker has to go throw for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. He just simply has to be able to maintain enough drives, play well enough, throw for 65, 70% completion percentage, get a touchdown or two, don't throw any interceptions, and keep them in the game. And then at that point, it's anybody's ball game, and now you're just looking at a possible turnover, field goal, something along those lines that can allow these two teams to stay close, and for Ken to beat Kenny.
Yep, I think you're right. I'm gonna have to. I think I'm gonna go with the Rams on this one. Might be a closer game than you think, but
I like I said, on this one here, I had it being a 4-point win for the Rams, and when you consider that that's 3 points of that is home field.
yeah, right.
So. But like I said, I mean, it could go anywhere from like Ken pulls out an upset win to where Kenny blows him out, depending on what Baker does, or Brissett or whoever Ken decides to start.
Depends on Brady too. I mean, Brady's laid some eggs. He laid an egg against me. He's had a couple of games that are horrific, but the game engine, the randomness, you don't know who's going to show up. But it'll be a good game to see who comes out on top.
And then
for the main event, the two hosts battle each other.
Well, this is again what I wrote on this is that going into the fourth quarter last week when I was up by 1 point, and Len basically took over at the end of the game. And you ask, well, why did that happen? And I am of the opinion, and Len can dispute this or just, give a different take on it, is that Kirk Cousins is a heck of a lot better than Ryan Tannehill.
I'd second that.
I mean, I would like to, this season, I don't know if anybody had a 4 turnover to 0 turnover ratio on the short side of that and won a game. I don't think it happened.
Be tough.
That's hard.
And that's exactly what happened last week. I think in the final quarter, Tannehill, threw I think two interceptions, and I think I had a fumble.
Yeah, there was a fumble. Definitely a fumble.
Yeah, so I mean, in that fourth quarter, and the game just totally slipped away. So, what is the secret for the Cardinals to win this week against the Cowboys? Well, don't throw the ball to the Cowboys. That would be a very helpful thing.
So hopefully you got your turnovers out of your system last week, is what you're saying.
Well, that and plus also, I mean, Cousins was on fire. I mean, there were several plays there where, I mean, quite literally, it was almost like schoolyard pitch and catch between Cousins and Mark Andrews. I literally had, my top, I had Xavier Howard and another guy on Mark Andrews, and Andrews is catching the ball for 18-yard, routes down the middle. And so, I mean, if and Cousins, if you look at him, he's on more like that than Tannehill ever is. Tannehill did have a game like that because Bob will tell you all about it. He will give you flow charts and dissertations in great detail as to why that was wrong. But because it was a 27 for 30 game, but Tannehill did not have a game before then like that, and hasn't had one since like that. So I put in the write-up, Tannehill just has to stay in the same stratosphere as Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins got to come to earth a little closer. He's got to get out of orbit, and Tannehill has to not throw as many passes to the secondary of the Cowboys as he does his own receivers.
Well, that secondary,
Cardinals.
Yeah, that secondary has its own issues. If you look on the screen there now.
Yeah, both of you got injuries.
Yeah,
he's got 3. I've got
Arizona's
6. I mean, I'm beat to hell.
Yeah, but he's got Derwin James.
Yes, he does. Right.
Yeah.
And you got White.
Yeah, but White's injured.
Yeah, I know. So he's got a 7 coverage out. You got like 2. You got a 7 out and maybe a 6.
Yeah, I got a quarter. Well, he'll be out a quarter, and then the other one, McLeod.
Well, that means questionable. Then. So
Right.
Questionable means like.
Oh, okay.
25%
Yeah,
chance
questionable.
of playing or something.
So either Mills or McLeod. I'll probably get one of them.
Yeah,
Probably.
they're 50-50.
Yeah.
And that's where I sat there and started looking. It's like, that's where I should have been like copying Kenny Mayne a little bit more as far as like setting guys around and like, I mean, there are plenty of games like why Derwin James played against the Falcons. I don't know. He probably should have been sitting at home eating a pizza or something.
Yeah.
But lessons learned. But in this particular game here, I mean, I'm not blaming Derwin James. I'm not blaming it. Ryan Tannehill has got to have a better game against the Cowboys than he had last week. Otherwise, then Len gets to lose to Calvin next week instead of me.
It's not gonna be that easy.
Well, I mean, and again, that all works under the supposition.
I mean, is the winner
the Rams win?
Is the winner of our game going to automatically play Calvin? I mean,
No.
because it might be
No,
the Eagles, which is equally about as difficult.
It depends on the Giant game. If the Giants upset the Rams, then I get the Giants. If they don't, then I get the winner of this game.
Yeah, because I'm not sure who I'd rather play if I win. Would Philadelphia or Chicago? They're both going to be tough.
You can't play Philadelphia, right?
I can't.
No, I guess you can. If New York wins, you can play Philadelphia. Okay,
Yeah.
I forgot about that. So name your poison.
Oh, I thought you were talking in a more theoretical sense because the Eagles are tough. Did you beat the Eagles this week?
Once.
Oh, I was going to say, okay, yeah.
I think I beat them once. They beat me once.
The Eagles beat me.
But I was healthy, I think, when I beat the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean,
Let me look here. Team.
See, if the top seeds win, then you have another.
Yeah, here it is,
rematch
19-6.
between the mains. Yeah.
19-6.
Defense showed up, only given 6 points.
Yeah.
And then in the second game, they got a little more efficient offensively.
Yeah, 49-28. This is where I started. See this right here around the 10-2, and then 10-3, 10-4, 10-5, and then ended at 12-5. This is where I started getting all those injuries in the secondary, and they've just, it was. If you remember when we played this game this past week, I said, well, I'm going to take some players out of my secondary because I can't afford to get any more injuries. And guess how many I got in the secondary? 3 new injuries, and they're all right here: Burris, Riley, and Wilson. They weren't big stars in the game, but their depth, sticking in the 32 and stuff like that. So,
Yep, you're tight on the 32 here.
Yeah.
Especially if Mr. Questionable doesn't show up.
right. Yep. It's going to be tough. So, who are you picking, Joe?
Oh, I picked you because it's like I have no reason why. Put it this way: if I'm going to go to Vegas, do I bet on Tannehill or do I bet on Cousins?
Well, if I'd lost to you this week and hadn't gotten any more injuries, I'd have thought, well, I could stand a chance. But this game has a tendency to turn things back around on you. If my secondary can hold you off, I stand a chance to win. If they can't, and they're banged up, if they can't hold you off, you're going to beat me. Simple as that.
I mean, I think if Tannehill, if I have two turnovers or less, I stand a decent chance of winning. If I have more than 2 turnovers, I don't see it.
Well,
and also, I mean, and to be also honest, is that Jonathan Taylor did not go off on me last week, and he could very easily do that this week.
Look here, and this is where I'm going to have trouble, and I hate telling you this, but I just don't have anybody with the injuries in my secondary to cover that guy.
Yeah.
I don't. I've got, 3s, 4s covering Ertz. It's not going to work.
Well, maybe he gets hurt. I don't know.
Yeah. Injury. So I don't know. It's a lot of good games this week in the wild cards.
But one thing, and this will contradict something Joe said earlier about the home team winning. I'm aware of 2 leagues, the ISFL and the AFC. And I was in the AFC, and I was like a number 5 or number 6 seed. And I darn near went to the Super Bowl. And our Super Bowl in that league was like a number 6 seed versus like a number 3 seed.
Huh.
And I looked at the ISFL, and it was similar. There was like a number 4 or something like that. 4th seed in a conference went all the way. All this to say, in this version, in the playoffs, at least in those 2 leagues, there's a lot of randomness here. So it's not a sure thing. I mean, if the trend holds, teams that look really good in these other leagues, number 1 seeds were going out.
Wow.
To teams that you would think had no business going out to. And
I was in another league. I think Pat, remember Pat?
Yes.
Pat was in a league. I forget who was running it. What's his name may have been running it. Good grief, I can't remember his name now. Crazy. But I went and took over the Vikings, went undefeated in the regular season, and lost in the wild card game.
Yeah, you can. I mean, there's randomness, which I think is good. Because the last thing you want, in my opinion, is a stacked team and you just roll through the season. And it's kind of like, this will be Jeff Bale. I don't know how to say his left name.
Bale, yeah.
Bale. I mean, I agree with this. If you get to the point where the game is just who can build the rosters and then it just rolls, it's kind of boring.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
and I had told Jeff this when I first joined this league, because one thing in the ISFL that you can get thrown out of that league if you get caught making a player inactive on your roster during the season. In other words, you're not allowed to sit there and to preordain a guy being available at the end of the season. And which is a big difference in what we do. And so by virtue of the fact that you can sit there and you can make players inactive during the regular season, I mean, and the argument that was made is like, look, okay, in the NFL, when we look at the NFL stats, we are seeing what happened. But if you're the coach, would you really sit there in real life set down Xavier Howard for a game against the Falcons just simply because you think he, I mean, his chances of getting hurt later on are just as great in real life as he would be as if he played against the Rams or against the Falcons.
To be honest, Joe, the AFC that I was mentioning, same rule. You cannot set people until like the last week of the season or 2. And what it does is, just like you said, I can't micromanage when we'll pick on the Falcons. Sorry, Mr. Howell. But if you're playing the Falcons, you can set, 5 or 6 players and see your whole. But, if you don't, if you have to play your guys all the season with no inactive, none of this emergency settings that I use, by the way, some do inactive, some do emergency. But what that does, that means I can manage through the year. I can, when it comes playoff time, I'm not in the situation you are, Len, where by Murphy's Law, Latimer could have played 3 games more than he did in real life, and then he gets hammered, and he's out the whole playoffs. So we have kind of like an accounting exercise here. And, that could be something that we talk about, like say, hey, nobody gets to be inactive. Nobody gets to be an E. And, they're pretty strong in throwing people out. But I mean, if we have the rule, it's just not being ethical. But it's something to think about. I mean, it would make everything different because in the Falcons, I could lose Jalen Hurts when I got to play the Rams.
So you can't go into your team management and just set players to off for that week, right?
I'd have to see if that's what people are doing, and that's why there's some teams that are super duper healthy.
Well, you can set them to be inactive before the game too.
Right,
Well,
but
well,
I wonder if there's a league. I wonder if there's an option there somewhere where you can just disallow this feature.
I've not noticed it.
I put it this way: in the ISFL, if you get caught, I mean, there is the roster that you release, that comes out of there. It comes from the commissioner. If you are caught, now, I mean, there was this period. If you're caught making a player inactive on your own, they could throw you out of the league.
It's easy to catch too because everybody submits their coach, so you know who the starters are. So I'll pick on me. I'm starting Latimer, and if all of a sudden you look at I played the Falcons. Sorry again, Mr. Howe. I played the Falcons, and you notice Latimer didn't play at all in that game. That means I had to set him because we don't use injuries before the game starts.
Right.
So if he's in my starters, he'd have to be in that game. So this is not that difficult to check. Now throwing people out is pretty rash, but I get it if
Well,
it's
I mean,
really
they just
a good rule. Honestly, it's a good rule.
It really is, and I brought this up to Jeff, and Jeff, I was talking to him on the phone about this, and he sounded like I was an alien coming from Mars. It's like, why would you do that? It's because you're taking the randomness out of the game. I mean, that's what part of the whole game engine is there. I mean, some guys get their injuries early in the season, some of them get them late, and I mentally don't think about it. But I mean, if I'm going to play in a division with like guys like Kenny and Sean's really big on this too. I mean, he's already described what he's going to do in the PSFAL and stuff like that in order to try to keep it. Because he's going to go in there with a fairly thin roster as far as on talent. But it's going to be great talent at the top, but a bunch of guys that are 350K guys at the bottom. And you can do that if you don't have to play those your stars against against weaker teams.
Yeah, I mean, we could prototype this in the PSAFL. I mean, the season hasn't started. I mean, it's a good rule. It really is. But again, this becomes accounting because when you rest, and I'm guilty. That's the way we play. We rest my guys. That's why I'm super healthy. If you look at my team going into the playoffs, I'm super duper healthy.
So what's to stop them? What's to stop them from like going into the game playing a couple good? Let's say you got your star cornerback in there, and so what's to stop them from going in there and after a few plays just replacing him with one of the backups?
Absolutely nothing. But
yes, tell them the but. Go ahead.
The but is that if you turn around and let's say your guy is active, let's say I have Xavier Howard and I don't want him to get hurt, so I say, okay, he's not going to start. Guess what he's going to do? He's going to play special teams.
Right.
And if you're only going to, if Xavier Howard plays 14 games that year and he gets injured for 3,
okay,
I could just as easily lose him on those special teams plays.
Yep, I got you.
But it's more than that, Len. It also counts as a game played.
Because you can go in, you can compare, let's say Waddle, compare what the players, how much they played. Games missed too. I mean, it's easy to you can go into the player edits and find this too. Missed games is 2 right there for Waddle. So,
but see, the good news, Len, a game is a game. So
yeah,
even if
a game's a game.
Latimer after I pulled him with one play, in the action world, that's a game play. And once he gets past, say he played 14 games this season, say I pulled him a bunch of times, those are still games played.
Right.
And then, because the injuries, my understanding, are based on games. It doesn't matter that he only played one game. He's in there for a game, and that game counts. And when injury time comes, and he's played extra games, he's going to be hurt.
Yep. So you may as well if you're going to start him one play, you better leave him in the whole time.
You might as well leave him in, and maybe he'll get hurt.
And that's the thing that I hope for when I've got these players that I know are going to get injured. I keep thinking, I wish they'd get injured early, and they never do. They just wait till the end when it's important to get injured.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what honestly is not quote unquote fair. I mean, the Cowboys show you what happens when you didn't schedule an injury all year. Everybody else in the playoffs have been scheduling their injuries, and that's why you look at all these other teams. Now Joe had a slip up, but everybody else on the NFC, you'll see we're healthy as can be. I mean, and that's because we rest players. So
Yeah, I've got a lot of them.
that's definitely something we should consider. I mean, if you're going to make it more, again, it depends. What type of league do you want? Do you want a counting league? Or you count, people talk about why, I had a conversation. Why do we add 10% on top of that? Doesn't that seem a bit much? And I'm like, yeah, but we've been doing it all along. The flip side is picking on the AFC, which I used to play in, but the AFC didn't give anything, so it was 6%.
Mm-hmm.
So if you got a wide receiver, a Waddle, catches 100 passes, he can catch about 6 in a playoff game, and he's going to start getting fatigued.
Right.
And I'm like, that don't make any sense. This guy he could have a playoff game and catch 12 passes. What's the deal with that? So
Yeah, I think we have 105% on the regular season, right, to start with, 105.
yeah, but I mean, is it unconceivable that Waddle in a playoff game could catch 10 or 12 passes?
Well, yeah, he can.
Absolutely.
Here,
But if
so-
we didn't have our 10% rule, though, Len, he'd be fatigued as all get out.
Check out this guy right here. Running back Snell. I use him when the game is in hand.
Over. Yes.
Okay? So he's averaging 2.7 yards, and he had in real life 36 attempts, in replay 79, and he's almost averaging what he did. I mean, he's averaging more here than he did here. And he's been, he's had the crap used out of him.
But again, that's when you say the game's over. The other team might be playing blowout.
Not usually.
So
No, not usually. He's just, maybe it's because my line is a good line.
your line is good.
I was going to say, I think your offensive line's better than Pittsburgh's. So, in real NFL Pittsburgh. So,
Right.
And
well,
it's
I mean,
random. I mean, you could have a terrible.
yeah, I've got a
average,
10 and 2 9s and a 7 and a 5-5. So, yeah, that one side of the line especially is really good.
So I mean, yeah, I had brought it up to Jeff that one time, and like I said, I mean, the way he made it sound like, I mean, I thought it was odd that he was very particular about fairness all the way through. Which, and to be fair, to be honest, I mean, that's a very valid concern. But if you think about the one thing that we do that's probably the least fair is to allow the stronger teams to set guys and set themselves up for the playoffs.
Yeah.
Because that
Right.
does take the randomness out of the game.
Right. From day one, I mean, I had a plan. I could tell you who I was going to rest when. Now, certainly some injuries happened earlier, but I just moved my plan around.
Yep.
But I
So,
mean, if we change that rule, it would have to be done
Between
well,
seasons.
It would, yeah. I mean, it would have to be done before everybody committed, because you can't turn around and, like, for instance, if you pass that rule in the PSAFL right now, it wouldn't be very fair to Sean, because he set his roster up to where he can, where
We're out of time, but here's the thing about that rule, and I think I agree that I'm okay with it, but we probably have to announce that rule a season before it comes into play. In other words, the rule's announced, and then you've got a season or so to get ready for it.
Agree.
I don't think we need to. I don't think you need a season. I mean, right at the end of the year, you could do it. I mean, it's equal for everyone.
Yep.
I mean, it really is.
Anyway.
right now we could, we could talk about it.
Yeah, we can. All right, we're out of time, so we'll catch you next time. Everybody have a good game in the playoffs, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
Goodbye.